Hashtag the Silent Hunter. Lieutenant Sarah Chun adjusted her scope one final time as she lay prone behind the rocky outcrop. The Afghanistan mountains stretched endlessly before her, their jagged peaks cutting harsh silhouettes against the dawn sky. 3 years of military service had brought her to this moment, but nothing could have prepared her for what lay ahead in the valley below. The morning briefing had been routine until Captain Martinez dropped the bombshell. Intelligence reports indicated a Taliban stronghold in the Korengal Valley, heavily fortified and protected by at least 7 sniper positions strategically placed along the ridgelines. What made this mission particularly challenging was the need for complete stealth. Any alert to their presence would result in the immediate execution of 3 captured aid workers being held in the compound. Sarah's team, Bravo Squad, consisted of 12 elite soldiers from the 75th Ranger Regiment. Each man was a seasoned veteran of multiple deployments, their faces weathered by countless operations in hostile territory. When Captain Martinez announced that their newest member, a 24-year-old female lieutenant fresh from sniper school, will be taking point on neutralizing the enemy shooters, the silence in the tent was deafening. Staff Sergeant Mike Rodriguez was the first to speak, his voice carefully controlled. "Sir, with all due respect, maybe we should consider having Chun provide overwatch while Johnson and Williams handle the primary targets." His concern was evident, though professionally masked. The captain's response was firm. Lieutenant Chun scored the highest marks in her sniper training class and has demonstrated exceptional skills in simulation exercises. The mission parameters require precision and stealth above all else. She's earned this assignment. Sarah felt the weight of every gaze in the room. She understood their hesitation completely. In a brotherhood built on trust and proven performance under fire, she was still the unknown variable. Her gender wasn't the primary concern for these professional soldiers, but her lack of combat experience certainly was. Every man in that tent had earned his place through blood, sweat, and proven competence in life-or-death situations. Sergeant First Class Tommy Williams, a grizzled veteran with multiple Purple Hearts, cleared his throat. "LT, no disrespect intended, but out there when things go sideways, we need to know you can handle the pressure. Range scores are one thing, but combat is something else entirely." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "I understand your concerns, Sergeant Williams. All I ask is the opportunity to prove myself. If I can't perform to standard, I'll be the first to step aside." The conversation continued for several minutes, with each team member expressing their thoughts and concerns. It wasn't personal animosity, but rather the natural caution of soldiers who had seen too many operations go wrong due to weak links in the chain. Their lives would depend on her performance, and they had every right to question an untested operator. Corporal Jackson, the team's communications specialist, raised another practical concern. "The terrain is going to be brutal, LT. Those ridgelines are over 9,000 feet elevation, and the shots we're looking are going to be at extreme range. Some of those positions are nearly 800 meters from our planned infiltration route." Sarah had studied the topographical maps extensively during her preparation. The enemy snipers had chosen their positions well, with overlapping fields of fire that covered all the obvious approach routes to the compound. The Taliban fighters weren't amateurs. They had been fighting in these mountains for years and knew every rock and crevice. The mission planning session stretched into the evening hours as they worked through every detail. Sarah found herself constantly proving her knowledge and preparation as the team peppered her with questions about wind calculations, ballistic trajectories, and contingency plans. Each query was answered with technical precision, slowly earning grudging nods of approval from her teammates. Specialist Marcus Thompson, the team medic, seemed particularly concerned about the extraction plan. "If we take contact during the operation, getting to the secondary LZ is going to be rough terrain. Can you move fast with your gear if things get hot?" The question struck at one of the fundamental challenges female soldiers faced in elite units. Sarah was in excellent physical condition, but she was also carrying nearly 70 pounds of equipment, including her M24 sniper rifle, ammunition, communications gear, and survival equipment. The mountain terrain would test even the strongest soldier's endurance. I've been training with full combat load for the past 6 months, Sarah replied. My PT scores are consistently above standard, and I've completed every training exercise within the required time limits. Lieutenant James Morrison, the assistant team leader, had been quietly observing the discussion. His input carried significant weight with the enlisted men. The real test isn't going to be physical fitness or marksmanship scores. It's whether you can maintain focus and precision when people are shooting back at you. His words hung in the air, highlighting the fundamental difference between training and combat. No amount of simulation could replicate the psychological pressure of knowing that a missed shot could result in the death of innocent hostages or fellow soldiers. As the planning session concluded, Captain Martinez pulled Sarah aside for a private conversation. His expression was serious, but not unsympathetic. Chun, I'm going to be straight with you. This mission could make or break your career. If you succeed, you'll have earned the respect of some of the best soldiers in the Army. If you fail, it won't just be your reputation on the line. Sarah appreciated his directness. Understand, sir. I wouldn't have requested assignment to this unit if I wasn't prepared for that level of responsibility. The captain studied her for a moment before continuing. The men are good soldiers, and they'll follow orders. But trust is something you have to earn in combat. They're not questioning your abilities because you're a woman. They're questioning them because you're unproven. There's a difference. Over the next 3 days, the team conducted intensive rehearsals using detailed terrain models and mock-up structures. Sarah worked closely with each team member, learning their individual capabilities and communication styles. Slowly, the initial skepticism began to evolve into professional acceptance, though true confidence would only come through successful mission execution. The night before the operation, Sarah lay in her sleeping bag, staring at the stars visible through the tent opening. Sleep came fitfully as her mind ran through the mission's sequence repeatedly. 7 enemy snipers, each in a carefully chosen position designed to make their elimination nearly impossible. The slightest mistake would compromise the entire operation and potentially cost lives. She thought about her journey to this moment, from her decision to join the military after college through the grueling months of sniper training. The instructors had been tough, but fair, pushing her to exceed what she thought were her physical and mental limits. Now, all that training would be put to the ultimate test. Dawn came too quickly, bringing with it the familiar pre-mission tension that every soldier knew well. Equipment checks were performed multiple times, communications tested, and final coordination conducted. As the team prepared to move out, Sarah caught Sergeant Williams watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Ready for this, LT?" he asked quietly. "As ready as I'll ever be, Sergeant." He nodded slowly. "Just remember, out there we're all counting on each other. Do your job, and we'll do ours." The words carried more weight than a simple acknowledgement. In the complex social dynamics of a military unit, Williams was essentially offering conditional acceptance. She would be judged by her actions, not her background or gender. It was all she could ask for. The helicopter insertion went smoothly, with the team fast roping into a landing zone several kilometers from their target area. The mountain air was thin and cold, immediately testing their conditioning as they began the approach march. Sarah maintained her position in the patrol formation, her equipment properly secured and her movements disciplined despite the challenging terrain. After 4 hours of careful movement through rocky terrain and sparse vegetation, the team reached their observation post overlooking the target valley. Through high-powered optics, they could see the compound clearly, a cluster of mud brick buildings surrounded by defensive positions and guard posts. More importantly, they could identify the sniper positions that intelligence had warned them about. The enemy shooters had chosen their locations with tactical brilliance. Each position offered excellent fields of fire while being virtually invisible from ground level. Taking them out would require approaching to within effective range while remaining completely undetected. A single alert would trigger a coordinated response that could devastate the rescue mission. Captain Martinez handed Sarah the spotting scope and pointed toward the nearest enemy position. There, approximately 700 meters northeast. Can you see him? Sarah adjusted the scope carefully, scanning the rocky outcropping until she spotted the telltale glint of a rifle scope partially concealed behind camouflage netting. The sniper was well hidden, but not invisible to a trained observer who knew what to look for. Target acquired, she whispered. He's got good concealment, but limited mobility from that position. One by one, they identified the remaining 6 enemy positions. Each sniper was strategically placed to cover specific avenues of approach, creating an interlocking network of defensive fire. Taking them all out would require careful timing and flawless execution. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez studied the tactical situation through his binoculars. This is going to be tricky. Some of those positions have mutual support. Take one out too early, and the others will know we're here. The team spent the next 2 hours conducting detailed reconnaissance, mapping each enemy position and identifying the optimal sequence for engagement. Sarah found herself at the center of the planning process, her input valued equally with the experienced NCOs. It was a subtle but significant shift in the team's dynamics. As afternoon shadows began to lengthen across the valley, Captain Martinez made the final decision. We move at dusk. Chun, you'll have approximately 30 minutes to neutralize all 7 targets before our assault team moves on the compound. Questions? The briefing was thorough and professional, with each team member understanding their specific role in the operation. Sarah would advance alone to the engagement position, using natural concealment to get within effective range of the enemy snipers. The rest of the team would remain in overwatch, ready to provide support if the situation deteriorated. The weight of responsibility settled on Sarah's shoulders like a heavy cloak. 7 lives hung in the balance, and the success of the entire mission depended on her ability to eliminate each threat without alerting the others. It was the kind of pressure that could break even experienced soldiers. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the mountains in shades of orange and red, Sarah began her final equipment check. Her M24 rifle was meticulously cleaned and zeroed, her scope properly adjusted for the expected range and environmental conditions. Each piece of gear was checked and double-checked, leaving nothing to chance. Sergeant Williams approached her position as she completed her preparations. Chun, I've been thinking about what you said earlier about proving yourself. Sarah looked up, unsure what to expect from the conversation. The thing is, Williams continued, you don't need to prove anything to us anymore. You've shown you know your business, you've trained hard, and you're here for the right reasons. Now you just need to trust your training and do what you came here to do. The words meant more to Sarah than any formal commendation could have. Coming from a soldier of Williams' experience and reputation, it represented genuine acceptance into the brotherhood of warriors. Thanks, Sergeant. That means a lot coming from you. Williams nodded and was about to turn away when he paused. One more thing, LT. When you're out there and things get tense, remember that we've all got your back. You're not alone in this. As darkness began to fall across the valley, Sarah made her final approach to the engagement position. Moving carefully through the rocky terrain, she used every bit of fieldcraft training to remain invisible to the enemy observers above. The compound lights were beginning to come on, providing additional reference points for navigation and target identification. Reaching her chosen firing position, Sarah settled into the prone position behind her rifle and began a methodical process of range estimation and environmental assessment. Wind speed and direction, temperature, humidity, and elevation all factored into the complex calculations required for precision shooting at extended range. Through her scope, she could see the first target clearly, an enemy sniper position behind a rock formation approximately 600 meters away. The man was alert and scanning his sector, unaware that death was approaching from an unexpected direction. Sarah's breathing slowed as she entered the mental state that every sniper knew well. The world narrowed to the view through her scope, her heartbeat steady and controlled. Years of training had prepared her for this moment, and now it was time to prove that all the preparation had been worthwhile. The radio crackled softly in her earpiece. Overwatch, this is Hunter 1. In position and ready to engage. Captain Martinez's voice came back immediately. Hunter 1, you're cleared to engage. Time on target in 27 minutes. Sarah acknowledged the transmission and began her work. 7 enemy snipers stood between her team and mission success. In the next 30 minutes, she would either prove herself worthy of the trust her teammates had placed in her, or fail in the most spectacular and dangerous way possible. The first target never knew what hit him. Hashtag the Silent Hunter. Document 2. The crosshairs settled naturally on the enemy sniper's head as Sarah controlled her breathing. The man was approximately 600 meters away, positioned behind what appeared to be a carefully constructed hide made of rocks and camouflage netting. He was alert and professional, scanning his assigned sector with the methodical patience of an experienced marksman. Sarah had studied his position for nearly 15 minutes, noting his movement patterns and identifying the brief windows when he would be vulnerable to engagement. Unlike the Hollywood portrayal of sniping, real precision shooting required extensive observation and planning. A hasty shot could miss entirely or, worse, wound the target and alert the other enemy positions. The wind was variable but manageable, shifting between 3 and 5 miles per hour from the northwest. At this range, wind drift would move her bullet approximately 4 inches laterally if she didn't compensate properly. Temperature and humidity were within normal parameters, and the elevation difference required a slight adjustment to her scope's vertical setting. Through her earpiece, she could hear the subdued radio traffic as the assault team made final preparations for their movement toward the compound. Everything depended on her ability to eliminate the sniper threat without alerting the remaining defenders. The enemy fighters below had no idea that death was approaching from the ridgelines above them. Sarah's finger found the trigger as she made micro-adjustments to her aim point. The first shot would be the most critical, as it would announce her presence to anyone within hearing distance. However, the enemy snipers were positioned far enough apart that a suppressed shot from this range would likely go unnoticed by the others. Her M24 rifle was equipped with a sound suppressor, reducing the muzzle blast significantly, but not eliminating it entirely. The weapon would still produce a distinctive crack as the bullet broke the sound barrier, but the directional signature would be difficult to pinpoint from a distance. The target paused in his scanning routine, presenting the perfect opportunity. Sarah's breathing stopped as she applied steady pressure to the trigger. The rifle recoiled smoothly against her shoulder, and through the scope she watched the enemy sniper collapse instantly. The 175-grain match bullet had struck him in the head, eliminating any possibility of return fire or alarm. Target 1 neutralized, she whispered into her radio microphone. Captain Martinez's voice came back immediately. Copy, Hunter 1. Excellent work. Continue with Target 2. The second enemy position was more challenging, located nearly 700 meters away on a rocky prominence that offered the sniper excellent visibility but limited concealment. Sarah would need to adjust her position slightly to get a clear shot without exposing herself to observation from the other enemy locations. Moving carefully through the sparse vegetation, she advanced 20 meters to a new firing position that offered better angles on the second target. The movement took nearly 10 minutes, as she had to avoid detection by multiple enemy observers while carrying her full combat load across difficult terrain. The second sniper was younger than the first, perhaps in his early 20s, but he displayed the same professional alertness that marked him as a trained soldier rather than a casual insurgent. His weapon appeared to be a modified hunting rifle fitted with a decent optic, and his position showed evidence of careful preparation and camouflage. Sarah settled into her new firing position and began the process of range estimation and environmental calculation. The increased distance required more precise compensation for wind drift and bullet drop. Her scope had been zeroed at 600 meters, so she needed to adjust for the additional 100 meters of range. The mathematical calculations were second nature after years of training, but she double-checked her work mentally before committing to the shot. A miss at this range could easily alert nearby enemy positions, compromising the entire operation and potentially costing the lives of the captured aid workers. Through her scope, she could see the compound below where the hostages were being held. Intelligence reports indicated they were being kept in the largest building, probably under heavy guard. Any alarm would likely result in their immediate execution as the enemy fighters attempted to deny intelligence value to the rescue force. The second target shifted position slightly, presenting a clear shot from the side rather than head-on. Sarah adjusted her aim point accordingly, accounting for the different angle and ensuring her bullet would strike vital areas. The shot would be more difficult than the first, but well within her capabilities given proper preparation. Her breathing steadied as she entered the focused mental state that separated expert marksmen from average shooters. The world contracted to the view through her rifle scope, with every environmental factor carefully calculated and accounted for. Years of training had taught her to trust her preparation and execute with confidence. The trigger broke cleanly, sending the second bullet downrange with deadly precision. The enemy sniper dropped immediately, his weapon clattering against the rocks as he fell backward into his concealed position. Like the first target, he had never known he was being hunted. "Target 2 down," Sarah reported quietly. The third enemy position presented an entirely different challenge. Located nearly 800 meters away on a steep rocky slope, the sniper had excellent concealment and would be difficult to approach without being spotted by the other enemy positions. Sarah would need to move significantly further from her team's overwatch position to get a clear shot. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez's voice came through her earpiece. "Hunter 1, be advised we're losing visual contact as you move toward Target 3. You'll be operating independently until you can return to covered terrain." The isolation was both liberating and terrifying. Sarah would be completely on her own for the next phase of the operation, with no immediate backup if something went wrong. It was exactly the kind of situation that tested a soldier's individual competence and mental resilience. Moving carefully through the darkness, Sarah used every available piece of natural concealment to advance toward the third target. The terrain was treacherous, with loose rocks and steep slopes that could easily cause a dangerous fall if she wasn't careful. Her night vision equipment helped significantly, but couldn't eliminate all the hazards. The approach took nearly 20 minutes, with Sarah pausing frequently to observe the remaining enemy positions and ensure she hadn't been detected. The compound below showed normal activity levels, with guards walking their assigned posts and lights burning in the main buildings. So far, her actions had gone completely unnoticed. Reaching a suitable firing position for the third target required climbing nearly 50 vertical feet up a rocky slope. Sarah secured her rifle to her pack and used her hands and feet to navigate the difficult terrain. Physical fitness became as important as marksmanship skills in this phase of the operation. The third enemy sniper was the most alert of the group, constantly scanning his sector and occasionally using handheld optics to examine suspicious areas more closely. His position was expertly constructed, with multiple fallback positions and excellent fields of fire. Taking him out would require perfect timing and precision. Sarah studied his routine for nearly 10 minutes, noting that he followed a predictable pattern of observation. Every 3 to 4 minutes, he would focus his attention on the valley floor below, presenting a brief opportunity for engagement from his left flank where Sarah was positioned. The range was challenging at just over 800 meters, pushing the effective limits of her equipment and training. Wind conditions were more variable at this elevation, with unpredictable gusts that could throw off her calculations. She would need to wait for a lull in the wind pattern before taking a shot. Environmental conditions were constantly changing as the night progressed. Temperature was dropping, which would affect bullet trajectory, and humidity was rising as moisture accumulated in the valley below. Sarah made mental adjustments for each factor, knowing that a miscalculation could result in a miss or worse. The target presented himself right on schedule, turning his attention toward the compound as he scanned for approaching threats. Sarah's crosshairs were already positioned correctly, and she fired immediately as the wind died to nearly zero velocity. The bullet's flight time at this range was nearly a full second, an eternity in combat terms. Sarah watched through her scope as the projectile found its target, striking the enemy sniper center mass and dropping him instantly. His weapon discharged reflexively as he fell, but the shot went harmlessly into the sky. Target 3 neutralized, Sarah reported, hoping the accidental discharge hadn't alerted anyone below. For several tense minutes, she observed the compound for any signs of increased activity. Guards continued their normal patrols, and no additional personnel appeared to investigate the sound. Either they hadn't heard the shot, or they had dismissed it as routine firing from one of their own positions. The 4th enemy position was located on the opposite side of the valley, requiring Sarah to move nearly half a kilometer through difficult terrain while remaining undetected. The clock was ticking, with less than 15 minutes remaining before the assault team would begin their approach to the compound. Moving quickly but carefully, Sarah used a concealed route that took advantage of natural terrain features to mask her movement from the remaining enemy observers. The approach required crossing several open areas where detection would be almost certain if any of the enemy snipers happened to be looking in her direction. Her route took her through a dry creek bed that provided excellent concealment, but was filled with loose rocks that could create noise if she wasn't careful. Each step had to be placed deliberately to avoid dislodging stones that might rattle down the slope and alert nearby enemy positions. The 4th target was positioned behind a large boulder that provided excellent protection from direct fire, but limited his mobility. Sarah could see him clearly through her night vision equipment as she approached to within 600 meters. He appeared to be older than the previous targets, possibly a veteran fighter with extensive experience in these mountains. This sniper was using what appeared to be a military-grade rifle with high-quality optics, suggesting he was a trained marksman rather than an average insurgent. His position was professionally prepared with backup ammunition, communications equipment, and what looked like medical supplies. He was clearly expecting a long engagement. Sarah found a suitable firing position among some low rocks and began her target assessment. The range was manageable at 600 meters, well within her comfort zone for precision shooting. Wind conditions were favorable, and she had a clear shot at the target's upper torso. The challenge would be timing her shot to avoid detection by the remaining 3 enemy snipers, all of whom were positioned to observe various approaches to the compound. If any of them spotted the muzzle flash from a rifle, they could easily target her position and end the operation permanently. She waited nearly 5 minutes for optimal conditions, watching the target's routine and ensuring the other enemy positions were focused elsewhere. When the moment came, she fired quickly and smoothly, watching the bullet strike home with lethal precision. The 4th enemy sniper collapsed immediately, his weapon falling silent. Target 4 down. 3 remaining, Sarah reported as she began moving toward the 5th position. Time was becoming a critical factor as the assault team's movement timeline approached. Sarah had to eliminate the remaining 3 targets within the next 10 minutes, or the entire operation would need to be postponed until the following night. The hostages couldn't afford to wait any longer. The 5th enemy position was perhaps the most challenging yet, located on a steep slope with limited approach routes and excellent visibility of the surrounding terrain. The sniper was positioned to cover the most likely assault routes to the compound, making him a priority target for the rescue operation. Sarah's approach required crossing nearly 200 meters of exposed terrain where detection would be almost certain if the enemy sniper happened to look in her direction. She would need to move during periods when his attention was focused elsewhere, using brief windows of opportunity to advance between covered positions. The movement took nearly 8 minutes, with Sarah freezing in place several times as the enemy sniper scanned in her direction. On 2 occasions, he seemed to pause and study her general area more closely, but apparently saw nothing suspicious enough to warrant investigation or alarm. Reaching effective firing range, Sarah discovered that the fifth target was equipped with thermal imaging equipment in addition to his standard optics. The sophisticated gear explained why he had been so alert to movement in his sector. If she had approached much closer, he would have detected her body heat signature immediately. The thermal equipment also meant that her muzzle flash would be clearly visible to him if any of the other enemy snipers were still alive to create an alarm. She would need to eliminate this target and move immediately to avoid detection by anyone using similar equipment. Range to the target was approximately 700 meters, requiring precise calculation for wind drift and elevation. The enemy sniper was positioned slightly below her elevation, necessitating a small adjustment to her scope setting. Environmental conditions remained stable, giving her confidence in the shot. The target was scanning systematically through his thermal sight, pausing occasionally to examine areas of interest more closely. Sarah waited for him to turn his attention toward the compound below before taking her shot. The bullet struck him in the head, eliminating him instantly and ensuring he couldn't alert the remaining two positions. Target 5 neutralized. Moving to 6, she whispered into her radio. Captain Martinez's voice came back immediately. Hunter 1, you're running out of time. Assault team moves in 6 minutes. The pressure was mounting as Sarah began her approach to the 6th enemy position. Located on a rocky ridge approximately 600 meters from her current location, the sniper was positioned to provide overwatch for the compound's main entrance. Eliminating him would be crucial for the assault team's approach. Her route took her along a narrow ledge that offered concealment from most angles, but required careful movement to avoid falling. The drop-off on her left side was nearly 100 feet to the valley floor below. A single misstep would end both her mission and her life. The 6th target was the youngest of the enemy snipers, probably in his late teens, but he displayed the same professional alertness that had characterized all the others. His position was well prepared with good camouflage and multiple firing positions. He was clearly a trained soldier rather than a casual volunteer. Sarah settled into her firing position with less than 4 minutes remaining before the assault team's movement. She would need to eliminate this target and move immediately to engage the 7th and final enemy sniper. There would be no time for extended observation or perfect shot placement. Range estimation put the target at approximately 650 meters, requiring minor adjustments for wind and elevation. Environmental conditions remained stable, though the temperature was continuing to drop as the night progressed. Sarah made her calculations quickly and prepared to engage. The young enemy sniper was scanning his sector methodically, following a pattern that suggested good training and discipline. Sarah waited for him to pause in his routine before taking her shot. The bullet struck him center mass, dropping him immediately behind his protective barrier. Target 6 down. Moving to 7, Sarah reported as she began her final approach. The 7th and final enemy sniper was positioned on the highest point overlooking the compound, giving him excellent visibility, but making approach extremely difficult. Sarah would need to climb nearly 100 vertical feet while remaining undetected, all within the next 3 minutes. The approach was the most dangerous yet, requiring her to move across exposed rock faces where any enemy observer would have a clear shot. Sarah used every available hand and foothold to climb quickly while maintaining noise discipline. Physical exhaustion was beginning to affect her performance after 2 hours of intensive movement through difficult terrain. Reaching effective range with less than 1 minute remaining, Sarah could see the final target clearly through her scope. He was older than most of the others, probably a veteran leader responsible for coordinating the defensive positions. His elimination would remove the last organized resistance to the rescue operation. The range was challenging at nearly 800 meters, but Sarah had already proven her capabilities at this distance. Wind conditions were calm, and she had a clear shot at the target's upper torso. There would be no time for extended observation or perfect timing. She would need to take the shot immediately. The crosshairs settled on target as Sarah controlled her breathing and applied pressure to the trigger. The rifle fired smoothly, sending the final bullet downrange toward the last enemy sniper. Through her scope, she watched him collapse backward into his position, eliminating the final threat to the rescue operation. All targets neutralized, Sarah reported breathlessly. Assault team is clear to move. Captain Martinez's voice came back immediately with obvious relief. Outstanding work, Hunter 1. Assault team is moving now. Return to Overwatch position and provide security. As Sarah began her movement back toward friendly lines, she could see the assault team advancing rapidly toward the compound below. Without the sniper threat, they could move directly to their objectives rather than following circuitous routes to avoid enemy observation. The mission was far from over, but the most dangerous phase had been completed successfully. 7 enemy snipers had been eliminated without alerting a single defender, clearing the way for a rescue operation that could save 3 innocent lives. Sarah had proven herself under the most demanding circumstances imaginable. Moving carefully through the darkness, she began her return journey to the team's Overwatch position, where her teammates were waiting to provide support for the final phase of the operation. Hashtag the Silent Hunter. Document 3. The compound erupted in controlled chaos as Bravo Squad's assault team moved through the darkness toward their primary objectives. Sarah watched through her rifle scope from the Overwatch position, providing security coverage as her teammates advanced on the buildings where the hostages were believed to be held. The elimination of the 7 enemy snipers had cleared the way, but the rescue operation was far from complete. Captain Martinez's voice crackled through the radio net as he coordinated the multi-pronged assault. Alpha Team, take the main building. Bravo Team, secure the perimeter. Charlie Team, clear the secondary structures. All teams maintain noise discipline until we locate the hostages. From her elevated position, nearly 800 meters away, Sarah could see the entire compound laid out below, like a tactical training exercise. The buildings were arranged in a rough square around a central courtyard, with defensive positions at each corner and along the walls. Intelligence reports indicated approximately 20 enemy fighters in addition to the snipers she had already eliminated. The assault teams moved like shadows through the compound, using night vision equipment and suppressed weapons to maintain the element of surprise. Sarah's scope tracked their movement, ready to provide precision fire support if any unexpected threats emerged from concealed positions. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez led Alpha Team toward the main building where the hostages were most likely being held. His team consisted of 4 experienced soldiers trained specifically for close-quarters battle in urban environments. Each man carried specialized equipment, including door-breaching charges, zip-tie restraints, and medical supplies for treating injured civilians. Sarah's radio crackled with subdued reports as the teams encountered scattered resistance throughout the compound. Most of the enemy guards were caught completely off guard, eliminated quietly before they could raise an alarm. The absence of sniper overwatch had clearly disrupted their defensive coordination. Hunter 1, this is Alpha Lead. Rodriguez's voice came through her earpiece. We've got movement in the northwest building. Looks like someone's trying to escape through a rear window. Can you provide eyes on? Sarah swung her scope toward the indicated building, quickly identifying the source of Rodriguez's concern. A figure in dark clothing was attempting to climb through a window approximately 30 feet from Alpha Team's position. The person appeared to be carrying a rifle and moving with the deliberate caution of a trained fighter. Alpha Lead, target identified. Adult male, armed, attempting to escape through window. Do you want him neutralized or captured? Take the shot if you have it clean. We can't risk him alerting reinforcements. The target presented a challenging shot due to his position partially concealed by the window frame and the need to avoid hitting structural elements that could deflect the bullet. Sarah calculated the range at approximately 720 meters, well within her demonstrated capabilities. The enemy fighter paused halfway through the window, apparently listening for sounds of the approaching assault team. Sarah's crosshairs settled on his exposed torso as she compensated for wind drift and elevation. The shot would need to be precise to avoid overpenetration that could endanger anyone in the building behind him. Her rifle fired smoothly, the suppressed muzzle blast barely audible at this distance. Through the scope, Sarah watched the target collapse back into the building, effectively neutralized without alerting other defenders. The window remained clear, eliminating the escape route for anyone else who might attempt to flee. Target neutralized, Sarah reported quietly. Window area is secure. Meanwhile, Charlie team had encountered heavier resistance in the secondary buildings where weapons and supplies were apparently stored. Corporal Jackson's voice came through the radio net with increased urgency as his team engaged multiple enemy fighters in close-quarters combat. "This is Charlie Lead. We've got 4, possibly 5 enemy in the weapons cache building. They're dug in pretty good and have automatic weapons. Requesting immediate support." Captain Martinez coordinated the response from his command position near the compound entrance. Bravo team, redeploy to assist Charlie. Alpha team, continue with hostage recovery. Hunter 1, can you provide overwatch on Charlie's position? Sarah adjusted her scope to cover the building where Charlie team was engaged, immediately identifying several muzzle flashes from automatic weapons firing from concealed positions. The enemy fighters were using the stored weapons and ammunition to create a formidable defensive position that could hold up the assault teams indefinitely. The tactical situation was becoming more complex as the initial surprise wore off, and the remaining defenders organized their resistance. Sarah could see additional enemy fighters moving between buildings, apparently attempting to coordinate a counterattack against the assault teams. "Multiple enemy moving in the open," Sarah reported. "I count at least 6 fighters with automatic weapons attempting to reinforce the cache building." Captain Martinez made a quick decision. "Hunter 1, you are clear to engage targets of opportunity. Prevent enemy reinforcement of Charlie team's position." This was exactly the kind of situation Sarah had trained for throughout her sniper career. Target-rich environment with friendly forces in close proximity, requiring precise shot placement to eliminate threats without endangering her teammates. Each shot would need to be calculated carefully to avoid accidents. The first target was an enemy fighter carrying what appeared to be a rocket-propelled grenade launcher, clearly moving to engage Charlie team from an elevated position. Sarah's bullet caught him center mass as he climbed onto a rooftop, sending the RPG clattering harmlessly to the ground below. The second target was moving rapidly across the courtyard, attempting to reach Charlie team's building with a box of ammunition. Sarah led him slightly to account for his movement, dropping him with a precision shot that stopped his advance immediately. The ammunition box scattered its contents across the ground. 2 targets down in the courtyard, Sarah reported as she scanned for additional threats. Her scope picked up movement near the main building where Alpha Team was conducting their hostage rescue. 3 enemy fighters were attempting to approach Alpha Team's position from the rear, apparently hoping to catch Rodriguez and his soldiers in a crossfire while they were focused on clearing the building. Alpha Lead, be advised you have 3 enemy approaching your 6 o'clock. Approximately 40 meters and closing. Rodriguez's acknowledgement was brief and professional. Copy, Hunter 1. Can you take them? The angle was challenging due to the proximity of friendly forces, but Sarah had clear shots at all 3 targets. She engaged them in rapid succession, placing each bullet with surgical precision to avoid any risk to the assault team. Within 30 seconds, all 3 threats were eliminated. Alpha Team's progress through the main building was methodical and thorough. Each room was cleared systematically, with soldiers using specialized techniques to minimize noise while searching for the hostages. The building's layout was complex, with multiple rooms and corridors that could conceal additional enemies or civilians. Alpha Lead to all stations. Rodriguez's voice came through with barely controlled excitement. "We found them. 3 civilians, all alive, secured in the rear room. Medical assessment in progress." The news brought a wave of relief throughout the assault force. After hours of dangerous movement and combat, they had accomplished their primary objective. The 3 aid workers were alive and would soon be on their way to safety, assuming the extraction could be completed without further complications. However, the tactical situation remained fluid as Charlie team continued to deal with resistance from the weapons cache building. The enemy fighters had access to substantial firepower and were using it effectively to prevent the assault team from advancing. Sarah could provide some support, but the close-quarters nature of the fight limited her ability to engage. Charlie lead, status report. Captain Martinez requested over the radio. Corporal Jackson's response reflected the intensity of the ongoing firefight. We're making progress, but it's slow going. These guys are well supplied and know how to fight. Estimate another 10 minutes to clear the building completely. 10 minutes was a long time in combat, especially with the possibility of enemy reinforcements arriving from outside the immediate area. Intelligence reports had indicated additional Taliban forces in the region, and the sound of automatic weapons fire could easily attract unwanted attention. Sarah continued her Overwatch mission, scanning the surrounding terrain for signs of approaching enemy forces. The mountains offered countless hiding places where additional fighters could be concealed, waiting for the right moment to interfere with the rescue operation. Her scope picked up movement on a ridgeline approximately 1,000 meters to the east. Multiple figures were moving along what appeared to be a well-used trail, heading directly toward the compound. In the darkness, it was impossible to determine their exact numbers or intentions, but their timing was highly suspicious. Command, this is Hunter 1. I have movement on the eastern ridge, approximately 1 kilometer out. Multiple personnel moving toward our position. Captain Martinez processed the information quickly. Can you determine hostile intent? Sarah studied the approaching group more carefully through her high-powered scope. The figures were moving in a tactical formation and appeared to be carrying weapons. Their rate of movement suggested urgency, and their direction of travel left little doubt about their destination. Positive identification on at least 8 armed personnel approaching from the east. Estimated time to compound is 15 to 20 minutes based on current movement speed. The news added significant pressure to the extraction timeline. Charlie team would need to finish clearing the weapons cache quickly, and the entire assault force would need to begin withdrawal procedures before the enemy reinforcements could arrive and complicate the situation. Alpha Team had successfully secured the 3 hostages and was conducting preliminary medical assessments. All 3 civilians were alive, but showed signs of physical abuse and malnutrition consistent with extended captivity. They would need immediate medical attention once they reached the extraction point. All teams, this is command, Captain Martinez announced over the radio net. Enemy reinforcements approaching from the east. Estimate 20 minutes to contact. Accelerate all timelines and prepare for immediate extraction. The order galvanized the assault teams into increased activity. Charlie team intensified their assault on the weapons cache building, using more aggressive tactics to eliminate the remaining resistance. Additional soldiers moved to establish security positions covering the most likely approach routes for the incoming enemy forces. Sarah maintained her Overwatch position, dividing her attention between the immediate compound area and the approaching enemy reinforcements. The tactical situation was becoming increasingly complex, with multiple threats developing simultaneously across a wide area. Her scope tracked the enemy reinforcements as they continued their advance toward the compound. The group had grown to at least 12 fighters, all apparently well-armed, and moving with the confidence of experienced soldiers. They would arrive just as the rescue force was attempting to withdraw with the hostages. Enemy reinforcements, now numbering 12 personnel, still approaching from the east, Sarah reported. They appear to be well-armed and organized. The weapons cache building finally fell silent as Charlie team eliminated the last of the defenders. Corporal Jackson's voice came through the radio with obvious relief as he reported the successful completion of their mission objective. Cache building is clear. We've secured a significant quantity of weapons and explosives, ready to begin extraction procedures. With all primary objectives accomplished, the assault teams began their coordinated withdrawal from the compound. The hostages were prepared for movement, with each civilian assigned to a specific team member who would be responsible for their safety during the extraction phase. Sarah remained in her overwatch position, providing security coverage as the teams began their movement toward the extraction point. The enemy reinforcements were still approximately 10 minutes away, but their presence added urgency to every aspect of the withdrawal procedure. Hunter 1. Maintain overwatch until all teams clear the compound, Captain Martinez ordered. You'll be our early warning system for the approaching enemy forces. The responsibility was significant, as Sarah would be the first to identify exactly when and where the enemy reinforcements would arrive. Her position offered excellent visibility of all the likely approach routes, making her the logical choice to coordinate defensive preparations if combat became unavoidable. As the assault teams moved through the compound, collecting equipment and preparing the hostages for travel, Sarah kept her scope focused on the eastern ridgeline where the enemy forces were advancing. The group had maintained their steady progress and would arrive within the next 8 to 10 minutes. The hostages were being moved carefully but quickly toward the extraction point, with each civilian supported by assault team members trained in combat casualty care. Their condition appeared stable enough for the movement, though extended captivity had clearly taken a physical toll on all three individuals. Sarah's scope picked up additional movement on a secondary ridgeline to the northeast. Another group of enemy fighters was approaching from a different direction, apparently attempting to coordinate their assault with the first group. The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly as multiple enemy forces converged on the rescue operation. Command, additional enemy forces identified on the northeast ridge. Estimate 6 to 8 personnel also moving toward our position. Captain Martinez absorbed the new intelligence grimly. Copy, Hunter 1. We now have enemy forces approaching from multiple directions. All teams expedite movement to extraction point. The race against time was intensifying as Sarah watched both enemy groups continue their advance toward the compound. The rescue force would need to clear the area within the next few minutes to avoid a potentially disastrous engagement with superior enemy numbers on unfavorable terrain. From her elevated position, Sarah had become the eyes and ears of the entire operation, providing critical intelligence that would determine whether the rescue mission ended in success or catastrophe. The weight of responsibility was enormous, but her training had prepared her for exactly this type of high-pressure situation. The first enemy reinforcements reached the compound perimeter just as the last assault team members were clearing the buildings. Sarah's scope tracked their movement as they discovered the carnage left behind by the rescue operation, including the bodies of the 7 snipers she had eliminated during the initial phase. Enemy forces have reached the compound. They're discovering our handiwork and appear to be organizing pursuit operations. The race for survival had begun in earnest, with the rescue force carrying 3 weakened hostages across difficult mountain terrain while being pursued by determined enemy forces who knew the local area intimately. Sarah's role would continue to be critical as the operation transitioned from rescue to escape and evasion. Hashtag the Silent Hunter. Document for the mountain terrain that had provided concealment during the approach now became a deadly obstacle course as Bravo Squad fought their way toward the extraction point with 3 rescued hostages. Sarah maintained her overwatch position, providing critical intelligence as enemy forces converged from multiple directions. The tactical situation had evolved from a precision rescue operation into a running firefight across some of the most unforgiving terrain on Earth. Captain Martinez coordinated the withdrawal with the calm professionalism that had earned him command of an elite unit. Despite the mounting pressure from pursuing enemy forces, his voice remained steady over the radio net as he directed the complex movement of 12 soldiers and 3 civilians across terrain that would challenge even experienced mountain climbers. All teams maintain noise discipline and stick to the planned route, Martinez commanded. Hunter 1. Continue providing intelligence on enemy movement. We need to know exactly where they are and where they're going. Sarah's scope tracked the lead enemy element as they moved through the compound, clearly following the tracks left by the rescue force. The Taliban fighters were experienced mountain warfare specialists who knew how to read sign and follow trails across rocky terrain. Avoiding detection would be nearly impossible once they began their pursuit in earnest. The second enemy group had reached the northeastern ridgeline and was coordinating with the first group through what appeared to be handheld radio communications. Sarah could see them gesturing toward different routes, apparently planning to cut off the rescue force's most likely escape paths. Enemy forces are coordinating their pursuit, Sarah reported. Primary group of 12 is following our trail from the compound. Secondary group of 8 is moving to intercept along the ridge route. Total enemy strength estimated at 20 personnel. The numbers were sobering. Bravo squad consisted of 12 soldiers plus 1 sniper, giving them rough numerical parity with the enemy forces. However, they were burdened with 3 rescued hostages who were in poor physical condition after extended captivity. The enemy had the advantages of local terrain knowledge and freedom of movement. Alpha Team, carrying 2 of the hostages, was making good progress along the planned extraction route despite the difficult terrain. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez had distributed the civilians among his strongest soldiers, ensuring that fatigue wouldn't slow their movement when speed was essential for survival. Specialist Thompson, the team medic, was monitoring the hostages' condition closely during the movement. All 3 showed signs of dehydration and malnutrition, but appeared capable of sustained movement with assistance. The most seriously injured was a female aid worker who had apparently suffered a broken arm during her captivity. Medical status on the hostages remains stable, Thompson reported over the radio. They're weak but mobile. The female subject has a probable fracture of the left radius, but it's not life-threatening. Charlie Team was moving slightly behind Alpha Team, carrying the 3rd hostage and providing rear security for the column. Corporal Jackson had positioned his strongest soldiers at the back of the formation, where they could respond quickly if the pursuing enemy forces got close enough to engage. Sarah's position offered excellent visibility of the entire tactical situation, allowing her to coordinate intelligence and fire support for the moving teams. However, she was also becoming increasingly isolated as the rescue force moved further from her location toward the extraction point. The enemy pursuit was gaining momentum as both groups converged on the rescue force's trail. Sarah could see them moving with the confidence of fighters who knew the terrain intimately and understood how to use it to their advantage. They were following multiple routes that would eventually converge at the extraction landing zone. Enemy forces are using parallel routes to our movement, Sarah observed. They appear to know our destination and are attempting to arrive there simultaneously. The implication was clear. The Taliban fighters had somehow determined where the rescue force was planning to extract, either through intelligence gathering or simple tactical deduction. They would be waiting when the helicopters arrived, turning the landing zone into a killing ground. Captain Martinez processed this information quickly, recognizing the need for immediate tactical adjustments. All teams, be advised the primary LZ may be compromised. Switching to alternate extraction point Bravo. Adjust route accordingly. The route change added approximately 20 minutes to the extraction timeline, but would take the rescue force through terrain that offered better defensive positions if combat became unavoidable. It also meant that Sarah would need to move from her current position to maintain overwatch capability. Hunter 1, begin movement toward alternate overwatch position covering LZ Bravo, Martinez ordered. Maintain observation of enemy forces during movement, if possible. Sarah began her movement immediately, knowing that every minute of delay increased the risk for the entire operation. The route to the new overwatch position required crossing nearly half a kilometer of exposed terrain where detection by enemy forces would be almost certain. Moving quickly, but carefully, Sarah used every available piece of natural concealment to mask her movement from enemy observers. Her equipment load was substantial, including her sniper rifle, ammunition, communications gear, and survival equipment. Physical fitness became as critical as tactical skill in this phase of the operation. The terrain was brutally difficult, with loose rocks that could cause dangerous falls and steep slopes that tested even her excellent conditioning. Sarah had trained extensively for this type of movement, but The stress of combat added a psychological burden that made everything more challenging. Her radio crackled with ongoing reports as the assault teams continued their movement toward the new extraction point. The hostages were holding up remarkably well considering their weakened condition, but the pace was necessarily slower than an unencumbered military unit could maintain. Alpha Team is approximately 15 minutes from LZ Bravo, Rodriguez reported. Hostages are maintaining pace, but showing signs of fatigue. We may need medical support immediately upon extraction. Meanwhile, the enemy pursuit forces were closing the distance steadily. Sarah's observations indicated they had correctly anticipated the route change and were adjusting their movement to intercept the rescue force at the alternate extraction point. Enemy primary group has changed direction and appears to be heading for LZ Bravo, Sarah reported breathlessly as she continued her movement across difficult terrain. Secondary group is maintaining pressure from the northeast. The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly as the enemy demonstrated their local knowledge and tactical competence. What had begun as a successful rescue operation was evolving into a desperate race for survival against numerically superior forces on their home territory. Sarah reached her new overwatch position with approximately 10 minutes to spare before the rescue force would arrive at LZ Bravo. The position offered excellent visibility of the landing zone and surrounding terrain, allowing her to provide both intelligence and fire support during the critical extraction phase. Through her scope, she could see the alternate landing zone clearly. A relatively flat area surrounded by rocky ridgelines that offered multiple defensive positions but also provided excellent cover for enemy forces attempting to interdict the extraction. The enemy primary group was approaching from the southeast, moving with obvious familiarity with the terrain. They had correctly anticipated the route change and were positioning themselves to engage the rescue force during the most vulnerable phase of the operation, loading hostages onto helicopters. Enemy primary group is establishing positions overlooking LZ Bravo, Sarah reported. Count 12 personnel with automatic weapons and at least one RPG. They're setting up an ambush. Captain Martinez acknowledged the intelligence grimly. Copy, Hunter 1. Can you engage the RPG team from your position? Sarah studied the enemy positions through her high-powered scope. The RPG team was approximately 800 meters away, positioned behind rocks that provided excellent concealment, but limited mobility. A precision shot could eliminate the anti-aircraft threat before it could engage the extraction helicopters. Positive identification on RPG team. I have a clear shot at approximately 800 meters. You're cleared to engage. Priority target is the RPG gunner. Sarah settled into her firing position, calculating wind drift and elevation for the extended range shot. The target was partially concealed behind natural cover, requiring precise shot placement to ensure effective elimination. Environmental conditions were challenging, with variable winds and decreasing visibility as dawn approached. Her crosshairs found the RPG gunner as he prepared his weapon for engagement against the incoming helicopters. Sarah's bullet struck him center mass, eliminating the primary anti-aircraft threat immediately. The weapon tumbled down the rocky slope, effectively removing it from the tactical equation. RPG gunner neutralized, Sarah reported as she searched for additional high-priority targets. The enemy response was immediate and coordinated. Automatic weapons fire erupted from multiple positions as the Taliban fighters attempted to suppress Sarah's overwatch position and establish fire superiority over the landing zone. Bullets cracked overhead as she pressed herself against the rocky cover. Alpha Team reached the landing zone perimeter just as the firefight intensified. Rodriguez deployed his soldiers in defensive positions while preparing the hostages for immediate loading onto the extraction helicopters. The civilians were understandably terrified by the intense combat erupting around them. LZ is hot, Rodriguez reported over the radio, taking effective fire from multiple positions. Hostages are secure but pinned down. Charlie Team arrived moments later and immediately began suppressing enemy fire from the southeastern ridgeline. Their coordinated response helped reduce the incoming fire, but the enemy forces maintained the initiative through superior positioning and local terrain knowledge. Sarah engaged targets methodically, using her elevated position to identify enemy fighters who exposed themselves while maneuvering between firing positions. Each shot was carefully calculated to avoid hitting friendly forces while eliminating threats to the extraction operation. Her scope identified a machine gun team approximately 600 meters away that was delivering sustained fire against Alpha Team's position. The weapon was positioned to control the entire landing zone, making it impossible for helicopters to approach safely. Machine gun position identified at 600 meters southeast. Engaging now. Sarah's bullet found the machine gunner as he adjusted his weapon's position, eliminating him instantly. However, another enemy fighter immediately took over the weapon, continuing the deadly fire against the rescue force. The second shot eliminated the replacement gunner, but the machine gun position remained a threat as long as enemy forces could reach it. Sarah would need to maintain observation and engage anyone who attempted to use the weapon. Captain Martinez coordinated defensive fires from his position near the landing zone center. All teams concentrate fire on the southeastern ridge. We need to suppress that position before the birds arrive. The concentrated fire from Bravo Squad's weapons began to take effect as enemy fighters were forced to seek better cover rather than maintaining sustained fire. However, the Taliban forces were experienced mountain fighters who knew how to use terrain to their advantage. Sarah's radio crackled with the approach notification from the extraction helicopters. Raven flight is inbound to LZ Bravo, ETA 3 minutes. Be advised we're taking ground fire from multiple positions. The pilot's report confirmed what everyone already knew. The extraction would be conducted under fire, requiring precise coordination between ground forces and aircrew to ensure success. Any mistake could result in the loss of helicopters, hostages, and rescue personnel. Hunter 1, we need you to suppress enemy fire during helicopter approach, Martinez ordered. Priority targets are anyone with anti-aircraft weapons or positioned to engage the birds. Sarah acknowledged and began systematic engagement of enemy positions that threatened the approaching helicopters. Her scope identified multiple fighters armed with automatic rifles positioned to engage aircraft during their approach and landing phases. The first helicopter appeared over the southern ridge, immediately drawing intense fire from enemy positions. Sarah engaged the nearest threat, dropping an enemy fighter who was attempting to lead the aircraft with his AK-47. The bullet struck him as he tracked the helicopter's movement, eliminating his ability to engage. Multiple enemy fighters were firing at the lead helicopter as it approached the landing zone. Sarah worked methodically through the targets, prioritizing those with the best angles of engagement against the aircraft. Each shot had to be precise to avoid hitting friendly forces in the confused tactical situation. The lead helicopter touched down heavily as bullets cracked around the landing zone. Alpha Team immediately began loading the hostages, while Charlie Team maintained suppressive fire against enemy positions. The entire process would need to be completed within minutes to avoid catastrophic losses. Loading hostages now, Rodriguez reported over the radio. 2 civilians on board, loading the third. Sarah continued her precision engagement of enemy threats, maintaining steady fire against anyone who exposed themselves to engage the helicopters or ground forces. Her elevated position provided excellent observation, but also made her a priority target for enemy counter-snipers. Bullets began impacting near her position as enemy fighters identified her location and began directing fire toward the Overwatch site. Sarah was forced to move between firing positions to avoid being pinned down by the increasing enemy fire. The first helicopter lifted off successfully with 2 of the hostages aboard, immediately beginning evasive maneuvers to avoid ground fire. The second aircraft was approaching for landing as the intensity of combat continued to escalate around the landing zone. First bird is clear with 2 packages, the pilot reported. Second bird inbound for remaining personnel. The tactical situation remained fluid and dangerous as the rescue operation entered its final phase. Sarah's marksmanship had eliminated multiple enemy threats, but the Taliban forces maintained the ability to interfere with the extraction through sheer numbers and tactical positioning. The success of the entire mission now depended on the next few minutes as the remaining personnel and final hostage attempted to escape the deadly ambush that enemy forces had prepared for them. Hashtag the Silent Hunter. Document 5. The second extraction helicopter descended through a curtain of enemy fire as Sarah maintained her deadly overwatch from the rocky prominence 800 meters away. The tactical situation had reached its climax, with the success or failure of the entire rescue operation dependent on the next crucial minutes. Enemy forces had positioned themselves expertly around the landing zone, creating a gauntlet of fire that threatened to destroy the extraction aircraft and kill everyone aboard. Captain Martinez coordinated the final extraction with the calm professionalism that had carried his unit through countless dangerous operations. Despite bullets cracking overhead and the constant threat of enemy RPGs, his voice remained steady over the radio net as he directed the complex choreography of combat extraction. Raven 2, you are cleared for landing. Ground forces will suppress enemy fire during your approach. Be advised, multiple threats remain active around the LZ. The pilot's response reflected the dangerous situation he was flying into. Copy, ground control. I can see the muzzle flashes from up here. This is going to be a hot extraction. Sarah's scope tracked multiple enemy positions as fighters attempted to achieve killing angles on the approaching helicopter. Her rifle had become the primary tool for suppressing anti-aircraft threats, requiring split-second decisions about target priority and engagement sequence. Every bullet had to count in this target-rich environment. An enemy fighter armed with an RPG-7 appeared on the northwestern ridgeline, approximately 700 meters from Sarah's position. The man was clearly attempting to achieve a firing position that would allow him to engage the helicopter during its most vulnerable phase, the final approach to landing. Sarah's crosshairs settled on the RPG gunner as she calculated wind drift and elevation for the shot. The range was challenging, but well within her demonstrated capabilities. Environmental conditions remained relatively stable despite the chaos of combat erupting around the landing zone. Her bullet struck the RPG gunner's center mass just as he was raising his weapon to firing position. The anti-tank rocket tumbled harmlessly down the rocky slope as the fighter collapsed behind his protective cover. Another critical threat had been eliminated through precision marksmanship. RPG threat neutralized on the northwest ridge, Sarah reported as she searched for additional high-priority targets. The second helicopter touched down heavily as automatic weapons fire intensified from multiple directions. Charlie team immediately began loading the final hostage while the remaining Bravo squad soldiers prepared for their own extraction. The aircraft's rotors created a whirlwind of dust and debris that limited visibility for both friendly and enemy forces. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez supervised the hostage loading with the efficiency of countless training exercises, but the stress of combat added complexity to every action. The rescued aid worker was weak from captivity and required assistance climbing into the helicopter's cabin. Final hostage is loaded, Rodriguez reported over the radio. Beginning personnel extraction now. Sarah continued her systematic engagement of enemy threats, working methodically through targets that posed the greatest danger to the extraction operation. Her elevated position provided excellent observation of the entire tactical situation, allowing her to prioritize threats based on their capability to inflict damage. A machine gun team had repositioned to a location approximately 600 meters southeast of the landing zone, where they could deliver sustained fire against the helicopter during its departure. Sarah identified the crew as they prepared their weapon for engagement. Her first shot eliminated the gunner instantly, but the assistant gunner immediately attempted to take over the weapon. Sarah's second shot dropped him before he could bring the machine gun into action. The crew-served weapon fell silent, removing another major threat to the extraction. Machine gun team neutralized, Sarah reported as she continued scanning for threats. The helicopter was beginning to show signs of battle damage as bullets found their mark on the aircraft's fuselage and rotor system. The pilot's voice reflected growing concern about the aircraft's mechanical condition under the sustained enemy fire. "Taking multiple hits back here," the pilot reported. "I don't know how much longer we can maintain this hover." Captain Martinez made the tactical decision to accelerate the extraction timeline. "All personnel load immediately. We're departing in 30 seconds regardless of readiness status." The remaining Bravo squad soldiers began rapid movement toward the helicopter, abandoning the methodical loading procedures in favor of speed. Every second on the ground increased the risk of catastrophic damage to the aircraft or casualties among the rescue force. Sarah's scope identified additional enemy forces approaching the landing zone from the east. A group of at least 6 fighters was moving rapidly across the rocky terrain, apparently attempting to reach firing positions that would allow them to engage the helicopter during its departure. "Enemy reinforcements approaching from the east," Sarah reported. 6 personnel with automatic weapons, approximately 300 meters from the LZ. The new threat required immediate attention, as these fighters would arrive just as the helicopter was attempting its most vulnerable maneuver, lifting off while loaded with personnel. Sarah began engaging them at maximum effective range, hoping to disrupt their movement before they could reach optimal firing positions. Her first shot dropped the lead enemy fighter at approximately 800 meters, causing the others to seek cover among the rocks. However, they continued advancing using available concealment, demonstrating the tactical competence that made them such dangerous opponents. The helicopter's engines increased to maximum power as the pilot prepared for immediate departure. All remaining personnel were aboard, including Captain Martinez, who served as the last man to leave the landing zone. The extraction was seconds away from completion. "All personnel loaded," Martinez reported. "Raven 2, you are cleared for immediate departure." Sarah continued engaging the approaching enemy fighters as they attempted to reach firing positions. Her scope tracked their movement between rocky cover positions, requiring precise timing to catch them during brief moments of exposure. The helicopter lifted off just as the enemy reinforcements reached effective firing range. Automatic weapons fire erupted from multiple positions as Taliban fighters attempted to bring down the aircraft during its most vulnerable climbing phase. Bullets cracked past the helicopter's rotors as it gained altitude and airspeed. Sarah's position suddenly became the focus of intense enemy attention as fighters realized she was the sniper who had been systematically eliminating their comrades throughout the engagement. Multiple automatic rifles began directing fire toward her rocky perch, forcing her to seek better cover while maintaining her ability to engage threats. "Hunter 1, all personnel are extracted." Captain Martinez's voice came through her earpiece. "Begin your movement to the alternate extraction point immediately." The alternate extraction point was located nearly 2 kilometers away across extremely difficult mountain terrain. Sarah would need to move quickly while being pursued by enemy forces who now knew her approximate location and were actively hunting her. Gathering her equipment rapidly, Sarah began her movement toward the secondary landing zone where a dedicated extraction helicopter would be waiting. The route required crossing exposed terrain where detection would be almost certain, but remaining in her current position meant inevitable capture or death. Enemy forces were already beginning to converge on her position from multiple directions. Sarah could see at least 12 fighters moving across the ridgelines, using coordinated tactics to cut off her escape routes. They were experienced mountain warriors who understood how to use terrain and numbers to their advantage. Her movement required careful balance between speed and stealth. Moving too quickly would create noise and visual signatures that would reveal her location to pursuing enemies. Moving too slowly would allow the pursuit forces to close the distance and overwhelm her through superior numbers. The terrain was brutally difficult, with loose rocks that could cause dangerous falls and steep slopes that tested her physical conditioning. Sarah's equipment load included her sniper rifle, ammunition, communications gear, and survival equipment totaling nearly 70 pounds. Every step required careful placement to avoid injury. Her radio provided updates on the successful extraction of the hostages and rescue force. All 3 aid workers were alive and receiving medical treatment aboard the aircraft. The primary mission had been accomplished despite the fierce enemy resistance and complex tactical challenges. Hunter 1. Hostages are secure and en route to medical facilities, Captain Martinez reported. Focus on your extraction. We've got a bird standing by at your alternate LZ. The knowledge that her teammates and the rescued civilians were safe provided psychological relief, but Sarah's own situation remained extremely dangerous. Enemy pursuit forces were gaining ground steadily, using their local terrain knowledge to predict her movement and position blocking forces accordingly. Sarah's route took her through a narrow canyon that provided excellent concealment, but also created a potential trap if enemy forces reached both ends simultaneously. She moved quickly through the confined space, knowing that detection here would be catastrophic. Emerging from the canyon, Sarah found herself on an exposed slope where enemy observers would have clear sight lines to her position. Movement across this area would need to be rapid and decisive to minimize exposure time. Automatic weapons fire erupted from multiple positions as enemy fighters spotted her crossing the open ground. Bullets cracked overhead and impacted the rocks around her as she sprinted toward the next piece of available cover. The enemy was close enough to engage with direct fire. Sarah reached a rocky outcropping that provided temporary protection from the pursuing forces. Her breathing was labored from the physical exertion of moving rapidly across difficult terrain while carrying heavy equipment. Physical conditioning was proving as important as tactical skill in this phase of the operation. The alternate extraction point was still nearly 1 kilometer away across terrain that offered limited concealment from enemy observation. Sarah would need to use every available piece of natural cover while maintaining sufficient speed to avoid being overtaken by the pursuit forces. Her radio crackled with the voice of the extraction helicopter pilot. Hunter 1, this is Raven 3 standing by at your LZ. We can see enemy forces in your area and are prepared for immediate extraction upon your arrival. The pilot's report confirmed what Sarah already knew. She was being actively pursued by multiple enemy elements who were closing the distance steadily. The race for survival had become a test of endurance, tactical skill, and sheer determination. Moving carefully but rapidly, Sarah used available terrain features to mask her movement from enemy observers. Each piece of cover had to be evaluated quickly for its protective value and the concealment it offered for continued movement toward the extraction point. Enemy forces were coordinating their pursuit effectively, with different groups moving along parallel routes designed to converge at likely extraction points. They understood that Sarah would need helicopter pickup and were positioning accordingly to interfere with any rescue attempt. Sarah's scope identified enemy forces approximately 400 meters behind her, moving rapidly across the rocky terrain with the confidence of fighters operating in familiar territory. They were gaining ground steadily despite her best efforts to maintain distance. The extraction landing zone appeared ahead through a gap in the rocky ridgeline. Sarah could see the helicopter waiting on the ground, its rotors turning as the crew prepared for immediate departure. The aircraft was positioned to allow rapid loading while maintaining the ability to depart quickly if enemy forces arrived. Raven 3, this is Hunter 1. I can see the LZ. Enemy forces are approximately 300 meters behind my position and closing rapidly. The pilot's response was immediate and professional. Copy, Hunter 1. We're ready for immediate pickup. Get here as fast as you can move. Sarah's final approach to the landing zone required crossing nearly 200 meters of open ground where enemy forces would have clear shots if they arrived in time. She gathered herself for the sprint, knowing that everything depended on reaching the helicopter before the pursuit caught up. The dash across open ground was terrifying and exhilarating simultaneously. Sarah ran with everything she had left, her equipment bouncing despite careful securing. Behind her, she could hear enemy voices growing closer as the pursuit forces realized their quarry was about to escape. Automatic weapons fire erupted just as Sarah reached the helicopter's loading area. Bullets cracked overhead as she dove into the aircraft's cabin, her equipment clattering against the metal deck. The pilot immediately applied maximum power, lifting off just as enemy fighters reached effective firing range. Hunter 1 is aboard, the crew chief reported over the intercom. Let's get out of here. The helicopter climbed rapidly away from the landing zone as enemy fighters continued firing from the surrounding ridgelines. Sarah found herself safely aboard the aircraft, her heart pounding from the physical and psychological stress of the extraction under fire. As the mountain terrain fell away below them, Sarah reflected on the successful completion of one of the most challenging missions of her military career. 7 enemy snipers eliminated without alerting a single defender. 3 hostages rescued successfully. An entire rescue force extracted despite fierce enemy resistance. Her performance had proven her worthiness beyond any doubt. Staff Sergeant Williams' voice came through her headset as the helicopter flew toward the forward operating base. Outstanding work, LT. You just proved yourself to everyone who matters. The simple acknowledgement from the veteran NCO carried more weight than any formal commendation could provide. Sarah had earned her place among elite soldiers through demonstrated competence under the most demanding circumstances imaginable. The rescued hostages were already receiving medical treatment at the base hospital by the time Sarah's extraction helicopter landed. All 3 aid workers would make complete recoveries, returning eventually to their humanitarian work in other parts of the world. Captain Martinez was waiting on the landing pad as Sarah disembarked from the aircraft. His expression reflected the satisfaction of a successful mission accomplished against significant odds. "Chun, that was some of the finest shooting I've ever witnessed," he said simply. "You saved lives today and proved that skill and determination matter more than anything else." As Sarah walked across the base toward the debriefing area, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From a skepticism of her initial assignment through the successful completion of an impossible mission, she had proven herself worthy of the trust her teammates had placed in her. The 7 enemy snipers would never threaten another rescue operation. 3 innocent civilians were alive and safe because of her marksmanship. Most importantly, she had earned the respect and acceptance of some of the finest soldiers in the world through demonstrated performance when it mattered most. The mission was complete, but Sarah's career as an elite sniper was just beginning.